Recording and let people in.
Is there more than one person?
Who?
Ooh, I look ragged.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Hopefully we get more people this time, right?
I hope so. I sent out a big old huge email, but we're going to go forth anyway because I know people are emailing me today saying they can't make it, but they want to see the video. So we're going to run through it today no matter what. You're on, but you're probably too young to remember the show called Candid Camera.
I've seen it.
You watched it on the oldies channel.
Well, what year did it come out? I'm pretty. I was born in the early '80s, so '82. So it might have been something I watched as a child with my parents.
Right. Another one is Hey Cool, right? The Fonz, you don't remember that either.
I know that one.
When I was a kid, right now there's a show on I like to watch called Chicago Fire on NBC. And when I was a kid, it was Emergency 51 about fire and police and paramedics in LA. And I even remember going to Universal Studios as a kid and seeing the lot where they filmed it. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, I walked into my dad's house the other day and sure enough, he had it on some channel. I don't even know where. I know he's not on YouTube, so it wasn't on YouTube because he doesn't know what that is.
Really?
He's got a TV that's Samsung that would get YouTube or would get some other things on there. I've even tried to show him how he could get a baseball app and watch games on the TV. Forget it. If it causes him to push 3 buttons, he's done.
Oh, I've been watching a lot of baseball.
Me too.
Fine.
Tonight's the important series, Dodgers and San Diego Padres.
Yeah, the Giants just played the Padres. Padres are pretty good.
Padres are very good this year. Yeah, they went from 5.5 games down to 2.5. In fact, if the Padres sweep the series, they'll be in first place. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens. The Dodgers have a run of 7 years in a row of winning their division. They could be in jeopardy this year.
Year doesn't count.
Well, all right, Ms. Camacho, if you're there and you're listening, can you turn your camera on? Yay.
There she is.
And she's still in her classroom.
Yes, I am.
All right. Did you get the message you were supposed to go home?
You mean till Friday, like potentially if we wanted to, or we have to?
I don't know if it's a have to or a want to.
I think it's optional.
It is? Okay.
It's
Yeah.
optional.
I think so, and it would sound better to be at home, but my nephews are all at home, so it's better for me to be here. Yeah.
Feel you on that one. Well, we'll give everybody a few more minutes. I know I had some people asking for me to share the video with them, so I've sent them the class link. They can join the class, and then we're going to drop the video in there. But regardless, we're going to go forth today and talk about how people learned. And so if it's just the 4 of us, we'll have a great time and make it happen.
Ow. My cat got me.
That's not good.
She's missing out on attention.
It's a fancy board in the background.
Who?
Ms. Camacho's got 2, what do you call it?
Prometheans?
2 drywall back there. Is that a closet too? What's that wall behind you?
Oh, it's there's like a storage room behind, so I just covered it up with wallpaper.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's wallpaper. All right. Well, it looks like a whiteboard from here.
Yeah, no, wallpaper.
Are you guys using two monitors when you're doing your Zoom stuff?
Yeah, I use the Promethean and my laptop.
Okay. So you project something up on the Promethean board, and that's how you're having like a second monitor?
Yeah.
Because you're using, okay.
Mhm.
I could never have figured that out. I would never be able to figure that out. I barely figured out 2 screens. And then I lose my mouse.
Well, it's just a cable. It's just an HDMI cable. So you just plug it in and then click the option source to make sure it connects to the HDMI.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Then it gives you that option. I tried doing it with my Promethean, but I didn't have the camera that was not hooked up. It was my computer camera, and it shined too much light onto the Promethean, so it wasn't an option for me. But now that I have an extended camera, now I have that option. So.
Oh, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could see why having two screens would be great, because on one side you could have your presentation, on the other side you could see everybody in the classroom. When I have some of my stuff, there's like 80 people in there. It's a mess. All right, well, let's get started. We'll see if anyone joins us. We are in session 1. This is part 3 of our breakout session, How People Learn, as we're concluding our breakout on establishing relationships. Have you guys joined the classroom yet?
Not establishing relationships.
Session 1
Oh,
is establishing relationships. Part 3 is learning. So yeah,
got it.
yeah, we did establishing rapport as part 2, and 1 was routines and teach tos. That's all part of session 1, and I'm going to use all these numbers and get everybody confused. But anyway, have you all 3 of you joined the classroom?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Did you get a chance to join our Google Classroom yet?
It's loading right now. So
Okay,
I'm
so
good.
you have to
You
go.
go. You can, yeah, you can head on. I'll be with you guys in just a second.
All right. And that's not supposed to look like that, but if you open up, you'll open up your Google Classroom, and on the 3rd slide, if you would click me to sign in, I don't know why it looks like that. It's supposed to look like that. I don't know why it got all jammed up on me, but if you'll click that and then sign in for us, that we know who's here. That's weird.
Do you mind going back one more time? I just didn't get that last number.
The 3rd, on the Google link.
Yeah, thanks. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, sorry. How do I get to that PowerPoint? I'm on the Google Classroom.
It should be in the stream. Right there. Today's Google slide presentation, breakout session 1, part 3, establishing relationships, how people learn.
Maybe. Oh, okay. So I'm in the wrong Google Classroom, not the year 1 and East.
No. Yeah, we're in the Madeira Classroom Management classroom. Did you find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the smoke has got my nose all dried out. All right, so click me to sign in is what it's supposed to say. And then let's hear from you. How are your frustrations, fears, and triumphs? What's the last couple of weeks been like for you guys?
A lot of learning as we go, being flexible.
Flexibility is the key, isn't it?
Yeah. Can't be OCD like I usually am this year. I'm just like each day, whatever, whatever I learn, whatever I planned for correctly, I was correct, and whatever I didn't, oh well, I'll learn from the mistakes.
Are you giving yourself permission to make mistakes?
That's kind of what I'm trying to get myself to think, like, is allowing myself, yeah, because I tend to be very like just, A, B, and C, and it should go that way because that's how I planned, but it's just not going to, I won't make it if I can't get out of that.
I feel you on that. I had an what was it? It was a training for writing our ILP and journals, and there were 85 people in the classroom, and my Zoom stopped working, and I had to get out and come back in, and I'm like, I'm dying. And managing the Zoom and watching the PowerPoint and trying to answer chat, which I hadn't figured that out yet, and entering people in the classroom. And then all of a sudden I forgot to turn off the email was popping up, and it was the worst training I'd done in 10 years.
Ooh. Ooh.
How else? What else has been frustrating for you?
I feel like I kind of feel the same way of just trying to retrain my brain to tell myself that like, this is not the time to be the perfect teacher. This is the time to learn. I mean, I can't be the most exceptional teacher that ever was in my first year of teaching, being in a virtual environment, and everything I do is something I need to be learning from, as opposed to like doing correctly. I just need to take whatever information I have and use it wisely and not feel like I need to use it perfectly, because like that's just not going to happen. But it's also been really frustrating because I feel like we just don't have enough time to plan and create valuable lessons for students. And when some triumphs is that, I have had very positive interactions with my kids, and for the most part, they show up every day and at least try to get their work done, and they want to be there, which is just, such a joy to see that they want to be there. They don't want to be, like we haven't had school all week because of the fires, and we don't have it today and we won't have it tomorrow. And, we were going into a 3-day weekend and they didn't want a 3-day weekend because they're like, what am I going to do? I'm at home. And so I think that's a joyful thing, but I also feel like they deserve so much more than I'm able to give them right now. So that's really frustrating.
Where do you teach?
What grade are you teaching, Lauren?
4th grade at Rivergold.
Oh,
Yeah.
And you were virtual before the fires, but you can't because you don't know where kids are. They might be evacuated. And
Well, I mean, as far as we know, there's only 2 families that have been evacuated, and like a couple of teachers, but they're being allowed to go back. So I'm not really sure why we're not in today or tomorrow. I think it's
because
just,
the air is horrid.
I mean,
Horrid.
it's not even as bad as Oakhurst right now, and it's
They can't even drive. They can't drive. They can't see. And even Corsgold and Oakhurst are on a warning. So you can only go back to your home if you have proof that you live there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I just said, not that I think that we should be in school, but I have to admit that like, it's almost a relief to have a couple of days where we're not teaching, because, we only had 3 paid days to plan. And this is a completely new profession. Like even teachers that have been teachers for 20 years don't know how to be teachers this year. And so to only have 3 honest prep days is really hard.
That's the 3 days is hard with a curriculum and platform that we know, much less
Right.
teaching yourself everything different.
Yeah. And I'm like learning, I mean, I know the standards, but learning the curriculum that they use. And, you know, they think the curriculum's good, but it's also very complicated and confusing. And it has an in-person as well as an online platform, but
Oh,
those
wow.
two don't always match up. So
Oh.
I'll see things in a book and then I won't know where to find them online. And the kids get very frustrated trying to navigate the curriculum online. And so I almost use it more as a resource, which makes it a lot more challenging for me because I don't have a structure. And I'm like building it.
Well, you know, I've talked about it, maybe not with you guys, but, you know, going into a classroom, in a regular classroom when you're not planned or organized completely is such a discombobulation or whatever feeling. And yet here you guys are not having any time to do any of that and get your heads around the two, you know, the in-person versus online. And it seems like you're kind of going around in flux constantly. And for those who want to have a little handle on things, which what I think is most of us, you know, that's a very uncomfortable feeling, which becomes very tiring.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, I mean, if I am teaching in the classroom, I can go in with a pretty either step-by-step process outline, or I can go in with like a vague, you know, like a theme and a goal, and then we can meet the needs of the students and like let it be a little more fluid and flexible. But when we're doing it online, I need to have everything preset so that they know where to click and what to click on. And I have the websites pulled up and I have the worksheets created. I have them assigned. I have everything created ahead of time. And so what happens is that like, I just work for, you know, 14 hours a day and then weekends, and it's not sustainable. Yeah.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Linda, so what about you?
I have the same frustrations as Lauren is discussing about, you know, there's not enough time. I have, you know, additional paperwork to fill out about daily and weekly engagement, attendance, and I work for, you know, Madera County, and we don't have a prep day, like a Wednesday prep day where we don't see students. We see students all week. So I have to manage all my time where I'm doing Zooms, but yet still have to fill out all my paperwork and complete assignments for them to do. And like she said, you know, get everything digitally done, but plus have it, I send paper stuff to my kids because, you know, they need the paper stuff also. So it is very frustrating. And then you have parents who feel like, oh, you're not giving me enough and you're not meeting all of our goals, or you're not, you know, supplying us with what the IEP states. And it's like, I'm doing my best through distance learning. You know,
With autism kids. So
yeah, and I'm trying to, you know, some of my kids do have behavior goals, and I'm trying to support them the best way that I can through social stories and, you know, taking the time to talk to them and discuss things. But then some parents don't even want to come on Zoom. I have 8 students and I only have 2 that are consistently there every day.
Oh my God, are you kidding?
And I have 1 that's off and on. And I also have a parent who told me that they are not doing nothing, that the packets that I send, if she wants me to send them back, that she's fine with that, but she is not a teacher and she's basically not going to do anything.
Wow.
That's
I'm like, so that's very frustrating. And then I have the fears of, is it going to come back onto me? You know, it's like, I'm supplying you with the materials the best way that I can. And I try to, you know, let her know, like, I understand that you're frustrated and that this is a hard time right now, but unfortunately, you know, these are the circumstances and there's only so much that I can provide you. If you're not coming on Zoom, I can't do it one-on-one, you know, and if you don't want to do the papers at home and send them so I can work with you guys on goals and stuff, then it's kind of hard, because it's like, what else can I do? Right. I'm trying.
Yeah,
but I do have my triumphs of my consistent ones who are there every day, who I can see them, you know, they're not regressing, they're doing amazing and wonderful. And so I praise them and their parents every day. Thank you. I tell them because they are doing their best that they can. And, you know, I enjoy seeing them. And I do want them, you know, to come back to school, but in a safe way.
Right. Gabriella, you're teaching third grade, is that right?
Yeah.
And dual immersion.
Yes.
And so do you have to teach all day in Spanish or English or both? How does that work?
It's both because third grade is 70-30.
70 Spanish, 30 English?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of combined. We have our whole Spanish section. We have our whole English section. Math is mostly Spanish with 15 minutes in English. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's how we divide that.
How many students do you have?
I have 20.
20. Are they all jumping online and doing their thing with you, or has it been a difficult task?
You know, they've all been here except for one. I have not gotten this one to say a single word. And I met with mom already over Zoom and got him to do thumbs up, thumbs down with me and her. But after that day, he still hasn't communicated. Other than that, other than him, everyone's been actively participating. But that one, I haven't been able to get him to interact.
Are they keeping their cameras on?
Yeah, this boy, he usually doesn't. And then there's one other one who usually doesn't, but whenever I ask him to, he'll do it. But then each block I have to ask him to. But other than asking him, you know, those two, the rest of them do.
And Lauren, you're teaching fourth grade, or you're nodding your head. You have the same kind of outcome?
Yeah, I have 2 students who I really have a hard time either getting to log in every day and stay throughout the block, or to come back after I've told them to go do work. And then, you know, those same 2 have done maybe 5% of the activities that I've asked them to do throughout the last couple of weeks. And then the ones that they have done, they've either done them incomplete or they've turned them in just without any work actually done on them. And then I've reached out to both parents and haven't had any luck with having them reach back out to me to create a plan or to create, you know, goals or, you know, anything. And so that's hard. And then, you know, same thing. I've got some students who I do have to continuously remind to turn their videos back on, and they do, and they're there, and like, that's great. And so for the most part, I have kids who are there every day and participating. And luckily all of my kids do participate when they are there. Like if they're called on there, you know, they're doing the thumbs up, thumbs down, they're nodding, they're typing, they're doing all the things that I would want them to do in class as well. But yeah, it's hard, especially, you know, like what we were saying earlier is that there's so much to do. And so when it comes to the fact that some kids aren't getting on, it's expected of me to keep track of all of the kids who don't log back on, and when they log off, and when the video is off, or when they're having technical issues. And it's like, I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to do that. Like, how am I supposed to teach a lesson as well as keep track of every kid that gets bumped out or didn't come back on, or, you know, it's kind of.
One thought would be a timer maybe that goes off every 10 or 15 minutes that reminds you to do a thumbs up who's here and who's not here. So you're kind of checking that in. The other thing I was thinking about, all 3 of you, and you just kind of described it, is accurate record keeping, especially on your interventions. Called mom, no answer. Called mom, left a voicemail. Called mom, we got on the phone and talked, but no change. You know, like Lanessa, I sent packet home, followed up with mom. Mom said they're not going to do it at home. Okay. But if you have all that written in a calendar or a journal, if it comes back to you, then you can say, well, here's all the things that I tried, and here's the people I talked to about what do I do about. And it's a way of covering your backside in case something goes sideways. You know, so like Gabriella was talking about, well, I got one kid that won't talk, and so this is what I've tried, this is what I did. This, if you just write it down somewhere, then it'll protect you in case it ever splashes back on you. What I've learned is that when we work with people, it's a messy job. And it doesn't matter what field you're in. When you work with people, in some ways, building a house is a lot less complicated.
You know what? On that point, I have been keeping record on Aries every day. And I told my principal because last Friday was the 10th day of no work and whatnot. So she called mom and told her to figure it out and have him turn his camera on or whatever she needs to do because the next step is a judge. So
Oh, wow.
that's what she told her. Because yeah.
Good.
So because of the record keeping, you know, like you said, yeah, I talked to mom, didn't turn in. And well, everything that I wrote in finally talked to mom, and then with no changes after a couple days still, that's when I had to tell my principal, and she called her, and that's what she shared with her.
Well, good for you. Sounds like you guys are doing your thing. What's something that's been fun throughout all this time, or something that's been a big victory, something you wanted to celebrate?
Crickets.
I've actually been using Flipgrid a lot, and do you guys know what Flipgrid is?
Yes, actually I do.
Yeah, it's a really awesome like video resource where I can like assign, I can give them a specific amount of time that they can record, and then they can put fun emojis and put a border and put music, and then they can edit their little video. And I've used it a couple times, but like one of the most fun things I did with it was we started the year talking about engineering, and I had them just think of a problem in their life or in the world that they wanted to solve. And if they could like literally solve anything they wanted, think big, and then know that of course we can't just go out into the world and get millions of dollars and solve every problem. But if we were to imagine like how we would fix that, what would that engineered solution look like? And then I challenged them to only use what they had in their house to create a model of their idea and then present it in their Flipgrid video. And they were so fun and so like adorable to watch. And they had all these like creative ideas, and they're like these kids who some of them just like don't talk, and then they're hilarious, and they've got their video and they're so creative, and they're like making jokes, but also they've clearly put a ton of time and energy into just like getting to express themselves in this new platform. And so that's been a lot of fun to utilize that and realize that I
Nice.
do get to hear my students.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Anyone else with a great story?
Well, I just like the reward that seems to be really motivating them is giving them tickets for a box so that they have a Zoom party on Fridays. And they've been really motivated to answer. Like I do it for specific blocks, especially review blocks, so that I know which kids are not really grasping and I focus on them. And then having the Zoom party on Friday during lunch so that they pick like 3 guests that can be with them, and they just have lunch together and catch up. They hang out with their friends.
That is fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. They like it.
Do you get to have virtual pizza?
Yeah. We actually do have stickers and whatnot, and we do the spinner thing to like give prizes or whatnot during the Zoom party, and then they share what they're eating and just different.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was teaching high school, and during the orientation, the kids coming up, they were freshmen, and when are we having a party, Mr. T? And I would always say, February 30th. Get out your calendars, write it in. February 30th, we're going to have carne asada. We're going to have nachos. We got soda. February 30th, I would say it 4 or 5 times. February 30th. And it would take them 4 or 5 days. Mr. T, yeah, there is no February 30th. Well, I guess we're not having a party then.
Oh, wow.
Well, welcome, Farrah. We're just kind of talking about our frustrations and some fears and some triumphs. And we've heard 2 great stories. Lanessa was going to just about tell us one more about a victory that she's had. I hope she's got one. And
I do.
yay.
I started, a system with my parents to try to to encourage them to send their kids, work home, because I want to display their work when they look at me on Zoom. I have their art behind me. So I kind of did like a reward thing where if they send their work, then I sent them like something that the student like a fidget or something that I know that they like as a reward of, oh, you did your work and you did a great job, so that they got to like see that, oh, I got this because I turned in my work. So it kind of works out, and the kids are excited and they like to show me on the ones that I do Zoom with, they'll show it to me, or and it's fun.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. Farrah, are you there with us? Are you driving home again, or what's going on?
Yes, I am. I'm driving.
All right. Well, we'll let you listen. We're going to move on and can talk about relaxation, since we've been talking about all of our fears. We're also going to review a little bit about what we've covered so far. I'm going to let Jenny take over a little bit here.
Where are we?
These are
So-
our components.
Are you doing it or me?
You.
Okay, so the components of pandemic MCMM, we changed a little bit because of the situation, obviously. We've got the classroom expectations, which we talked about, and the instructional environment. That included the teach tos, procedures, building rapport, and how people learn, which we're doing today. The next one will be instructional strategies, basically in a lesson planning, and how best to engage your students, motivate your students, and reach their needs. And then the interventions, which is PBIS, refocus, and disciplinary process, and how all three of those can go together in any given school, and how it will help you as an instructor, teacher. What are we doing?
Calendar. I just wanted to show the calendar. It's in the classroom. I put it in there today, but those are the dates of those sessions that Jenny just mentioned. That's it.
Okay, next one. So with classroom expectations, our review is going to be the classroom expectations, controlling your emotions and diffusers. When we get into the next slide, go ahead, Steve. So I know a couple of you were there for classroom expectations, but one of the first things if you want a student or a class to follow your rules or procedures, you have to teach them first. So whether it's how to sharpen a pencil, how to get up and answer or ask a question, raise your hand, whatever your policy is, doesn't matter if it's what the person next to you does or not. As long as you teach it, your kids can then be held accountable for that. So the only difference now is you have to incorporate the whole online discipline part of things. In order to teach those things, you have to teach it through a teach to. So if I wanted to explain to my students how I want them to turn their desks into a circle, you can only imagine by just saying, hey, put your desks in a circle, how that's going to go. Even with high school kids, good God, I've never heard so much noise and sounds like scraping of nails on the chalkboard. And so had I ever bothered to just go, okay, this is how I want it done. I demonstrate it. I have them demonstrate it with me. And then I have them do it as practice on their own. I've now taught it. Now I can hold them accountable. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. Oh, it's doing that font. That's what it is. So in the staying calm, Steve talked about the fight or flight reflex in our reptilian brain. And if, as a mammal, if we are triggered, we either fight or we fly away. And that is how we stayed alive back in, caveman days, but it's also how we still react. That part of our brain is still very reactive in the regards to the adrenaline starts flowing, and we either fight or we run away. And it's a natural response to things that we are confronted with. It upsets the changes in your brain function. The reptilian is the instinctive. You've got the ancient cortex and the new cortex. With those, staying calm is actually an art, and it's actually a skill. And Steve implemented a couple of those techniques. Go ahead, Steve.
let me fix that. Sorry, I was muted. We talked about relaxing. We talked about taking a breath in, relaxing, making sure that we check our jaw and not have any sort of emotional reaction. And we talked about some relaxation techniques where we scrunched all our muscles up and then relaxed. And are you guys, I was thinking about Lauren and even Lanissa, all the things that are going on. Lauren, you only had 3 days of prep. I imagine that your guys' stress level is at an all-time high. You all feeling that? Yeah. So relaxing and learning how to relax and learning how to control our emotions is important, partly because they're contagious. So how you're feeling is contagious to the people that you're working with, in this case, your students. So we talked quite a bit about relaxing, checking your jaw, unclenching, and some of those techniques.
So go ahead. This is your thing.
We just talked about that, so I'm going to move on. Diffusers. So
diffusers are used, I use it as a term of putting the kids on their heels. They, especially when they get really sassy with you or what have you, we talk about not engaging, not letting them take you up the staircase or elevate the stress. And so one of the ways to do that is when a child says, I was a high school English teacher, so I often heard things like, Miss Taylor, Romeo and Juliet is so gay. And, normally I'd be like, how can you say that's gay? Oh my God, that's not gay, blah, 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 blah. And I go on this big tangent. What I should have said is, that may be, but we're still going to read it. And they don't really have a response to that. Or if they say, I'm tired, I'm sorry, but we're still going to read this. Or what's another thing? This is too hard. That may be, but we're going to conquer it together. Like there's always a response that you can use to somewhat disarm a student who's very angry and hostile or very just frustrated or is trying to get a rise out of things or to distract. Lanissa, that may not work, obviously, for most autistic kids because they are very literal and they don't get necessarily any sarcasm. This isn't necessarily supposed to be used as sarcasm, but I would assume that being more direct with the autistic population is a little bit probably more productive. But most average kids that are trying to rile you up will respond to this.
Have you ever heard a kid say, this is so boring?
Yeah.
How would you handle that, Jenny? This is so boring.
That may be, but guess what? We're going to be bored together. No, that is how I would have handled that. The story that I heard regarding these is kind of funny. This guy, this kid in class said, Mr. C, I don't want to do this. I'm too stupid. And without missing a beat, the guy says, that may be, but da, 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 except it was a board member's kid.
Oh, no.
So obviously know your crowd and know your context.
Very good. All right, let's talk about how people learn. And in thinking about that, it might help you to adjust some of your lessons. But give me a second. I got to turn my air conditioner on because it's getting warm in here. Hold on a second.
I think really he's having a hot flash and he doesn't know how to tell her. I can only say that because we're all women right now.
All right, 79 degrees in here. It's kind of getting stuffy. All right, let's talk about how people learn. Talk about this. How do you measure engagement? What evidence do you see in learning activities that are designed that shows that your kids are engaged? How do you know your kids are engaged?
They're asking questions.
Okay. But does it kind of depend on what kind of questions they're asking? Like, what page are we on again? Might not be a good engagement question.
Yeah, you're right. I guess I mean like they're asking questions about the content rather than the procedure.
Ah, what a great way to define it. Say that again. Say that again.
They're asking questions about content rather than procedure.
I'm writing that down. That was awesome.
He won't be able to find the note, but he's writing it down.
I won't be able to read it, right?
Go rewatch the video.
Yeah. Over and over.
That's a great way of answering that. I'm blown away. Good, good. What else do we think about when we think about engagement? How do you know? They ask questions about the content instead of the procedure. What else?
I mean, they're answering correctly, right?
All right, so they can at least answer the question. They're not looking at you going, I don't know. And they can't even cheat right now because they're not sitting next to their buddy to get the answer, right?
For
I'm
me
sure
and
they
my
found this.
students, sorry,
What's
for
that?
me and my students, it's more like focus, like I can see them focusing on the materials and watching their movements, moving from one item to the next. So for me, it's a lot of like engagement, like watching them do those sort of things, and or picking up. And I send home a lot of icons, picking up the correct icon and showing me the icon, just so like they're saying that's how they answer the question, and I know that they're paying attention to the activity that we're working on.
Good. Is there a difference between a student that's following directions and a student that's engaged?
Yeah.
Right? So you told them to do the 4 problems. They're doing 4 problems, but it's going in one ear and out the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that the kids can kind of trick us into engagement. So we need to figure out how to make sure that our students are engaged. But some of the evidences of that are, we see pre-teaching before the reading. How many of you guys utilize that?
Mm.
Do you pre-teach before you start reading?
I'll usually, with like our curriculum that we're using, there is like a big ideas section where we go over like the big idea vocabulary and we create like a mind map with it. And I've just started really incorporating that.
Okay.
So you mean like KWL charts and circle maps and things like that? Okay, yeah.
Good. Do you get students to share before you start the lesson?
I kind of do. I talk about like if it's a story that we're going to read, I kind of ask them how they feel about certain things. If it's a feelings book, like how are you feeling right now, and just talking about different emotions, and then discuss, okay, this is a story about a girl who, and then kind of go that kind of route where I'm kind of giving them the keywords that we're going to be talking about within the story.
Mm.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, I went to a reading and writing conference over at Fresno State many years back. And one of the things the teacher did, which I thought was phenomenal for any grade level, is as you're reading, if let's say you're the reader, you just stop, maybe mid-sentence, maybe, not at a triggered place like chapter or the end of the page. You just stop, and then you'll say, anybody want to tell me what's going to happen next? And you have them predict and you have them do all that. And what I thought was cool is I thought it would break the flow of the book, but it really doesn't. And so as you're reading, if you get you'll get more skilled at when you stop, but don't let them plan it. Don't let them plan who you're going to ask. Don't let it, don't be predictable, but it also teaches pre-reading skills and strong proactive reading skills and active reading skills, whatever I'm trying to say. But the point is you can't be predictable, and you will notice whether they're engaged or not, right? By their responses, their reactions, their eyes. You can read so much about them when you're reading and catching them and having them share with you. It gets kind of fun too, because some of them go way off crazy, but they're engaged.
Nice.
I saw something recently. I mean, I used Padlet while I was getting my credential, and it's like a board, like an online board where everybody can like post little notes onto it or pictures or add links, and it just like looks like a big bulletin board like online. And you can invite however many people you want to co-create the board with you. And I saw in another webinar a teacher who used that while reading and would pause, and everyone was on the same Padlet. So they had like, you know, their Google Meeting or their Zoom up here and then their Padlet up like side by side. And so she would stop and have them put their predictions up on the on their little online board.
Nice.
And one of my goals for when we finally get to go back is we're about to start a new story, and that's something that I really want to use. So if you guys also need a way for kids to like put their comments without taking up a bunch of class time with like verbal comments, then that might be something that's useful.
That's awesome. Padlet?
Yeah,
P-A-D-L-E-T.
Padlet, P-A-D-L-E-T. Yeah.
Padlet. Nice. Lauren's got all kind of stuff for us today. We should have her lead our seminar.
It's okay. I don't need extra work, Steve.
All right. How about this? How much attention span does a child have? And now we're going to ask it in two ways. First on Zoom and second in the classroom. How much attention span do you get? Like for instance, let's start with you. How much endurance do you have to stare at a computer and interact with people when you're on the receiving end of learning? In other words, how long can you stick around with me today?
I think it depends. Like if we're interacting, way longer, you know, if we're just listening or watching.
So if I was talking for 2 hours, it would be really hard to, you'd be like, I'm out.
Yep.
I have one student that he's been my student for 2 years. He's actually, I don't know if it's because he's grown up or he hit a spurt or like he's excelling, but he engages more on Zoom. And I'm not sure if it's because he's sitting at home eating his hot Funyuns as he's working, but the engagement at home through Zoom is way better than at school. At school, I'm constantly having to remind him, okay, let's work. Let's keep working, you know, like we're almost done. But on Zoom, he just goes through the stuff so fast.
Yeah.
And I just think it's that whole different atmosphere of home, school, maybe. And like I said, he might have grown up, you know, had a spurt, but engagement is way better.
And then, of course, in his case, it might even just be the social anxiety has gone way down because he's by himself. He's not getting 100 different inputs from all the sound and the birds and the water fountain that's dripping and the garbage can and the kids sharpening a pencil and he can focus out. Yeah, that might be a better environment for him. I'm looking at my 2 high school kids at home and thinking it's a worse environment. They need that social interaction. They need the peer pressure of sitting around with kids that are getting A's, that are pushing them a little harder. They need the social break to go outside at recess and do whatever kids do. And it's harder for them to stay engaged. When you went to school, did you have in high school any teachers that would talk for 45 minutes and you had to take notes? Or did they change it by the time you got there?
I don't remember talking for 45 minutes, but they talked a lot.
College was like that though, wasn't it? They lectured for an hour and a half.
College lectures, were the worst.
And long. And afternoon classes were the worst because it was nap time.
My high school, so I'm getting old now. I'm 55 years old, and I'm okay with being 55, except things are starting to break now that I didn't expect to break. But wake up and I got arthritis in my hands. That's an old person thing. Oh, I guess I am old. But when I was in high school, my teachers would teach us how to take notes, and we had to sit and listen for 30 or 40 minutes and write everything down. And I'm wondering if in our Zoom environment, because it's unfamiliar, if we're talking more and listening less. And I wrote this little slide here, and I got it from Tools for Teaching. And it's the idea is that the teacher's outputting, and then all of a sudden they're asking for input from the students. And so there's a pattern of we're talking for a long time, and then all of a sudden we're asking for a response. Well, how long can a kid hang on listening to our direct instruction? And and I gotta wonder, I think Jenny said at one time that it's a minute for every age. So a 6-year-old kid can pay attention for 6 minutes. A 12-year-old kid can pay attention for 12 minutes. I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Has that been your experience? How long can your third graders hang, Gabriella?
Well, I don't know, I would say like 20 minutes, and then we do Go Noodles, but in between there, I ask questions, or sometimes we do jam boards or things like that where they're participating as we go. But I would say 20 minutes is probably what I do before like a stand up and, or just complete break.
A complete break.
It's interesting because I taught high school, and I wouldn't go over 20 minutes at all. I would change the brain activities. We could go reading 1 minute, but then the next minute I'd break it into a discussion or something, just trying to keep them, because I mean, technically I should have an attention span of 52 minutes, and I am more likely to have an attention span of 5 minutes. So I think about how bored I would be, and I try to keep it going, because I was not a sit very long kind of person.
Yeah, I have I'm thinking of my pastor. I love him to death, but he's old school in a lot of ways, and he thinks that preaching for an hour and 20 minutes is a good thing. And I'm trying to tell him, our new generation doesn't have I try to tell him this, when our congregation's buns get numb, so do the ears.
Wow.
And we just, it's a different world. So what we're looking at, and I think, Gabrielle, you actually touched on it, and you said output and then input, and then output. Even I go 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm asking for them to give me a response of some sort. And then after 20 minutes, I'm giving them a brain break and stand up and stretch, or break into small groups, or get out your scissors, or what have you. Pacing is what we're talking about here. And it's critical to keeping people engaged. And the days of lecturing for 20 minutes and then expecting kids to get it is over. Plus, it's a poor way for people to learn. We only remember about 5% of the things that we hear. That's why I got to watch this video over and over again to remember that line, asking questions about content instead of the process.
But it's true, because it goes back to the whole short-term, long-term memory. If we don't manipulate it in multiple formats, we are not going to remember it. And so doing it through a variety of activities, I mean, we all know this, but it definitely helps us retain that information as the more we, manipulate, take the information and make it malleable and make it, the way we can understand it.
Yep.
Linda, wait, Linda,
Oh.
I'm curious, what would you say the attention span for your average student is?
Oh, mine, few minutes, depending, like a minute. I'm constantly like trying to redirect them. I'm finding different ways. Like some of my kids have sight goals, so sight word reading goals. And so it's hard to do that in the format of a PowerPoint when it's just so plain. So in between, I'll throw in like a random picture of something I know they like Paw Patrol. Oh, look, it's Chase. Oh, what's Chase wearing? To kind of distract them, because they do get a little overwhelmed. So I'm trying to, they'll have to read 5 sight words, and then you get a picture of something, and then 5 more, and then there's something else. So it's just that constant. But I would say it's about a minute or 2. So
you're having to be really creative and break it up a lot. Wow. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that educators' job description includes being entertaining?
Yeah.
I didn't realize how true this was until I got really sick. And when I was really tired, people would say, can't you just go in and sit there? And I thought, well, no, because the minute we walk in, we are performers. And especially with our kids that are so, short-term, instant gratification learners or watchers, really, viewers, we have to we're competing with that. So we have to be entertaining, or at least be really creative in our lesson planning to be creative. Maybe we're not the most dynamic people in the world, but we can make our lessons more dynamic. And I realized that was what the exhausting part of teaching is that, we're actresses every day. every day. And I used to get mad at our counseling staff because they could go into work and then take an hour to have coffee and talk to each other and get their stuff together. Well, as teachers, we got kids waiting at the door. Like there was no bump time, right? You hit it and you're on. And when you're off, you know that those kids go off too. They go off the rails if they know you're not spot on.
And I think you are very accurate in what you're saying. And sometimes it's kind of hard to do that over Zoom. I find myself like with the songs and I'm like, going dancing, doing what I can, but I'm like, people probably think I look crazy. But I'm trying to keep them, engaged and entertained. And
Your neighbors are all, come on.
Yeah, it can be, it's a show. It's a movie, we're performing.
And I think there's a lot of room to be really creative. I think it's just so overwhelming right now.
Yeah.
I think you've got an opportunity to do some really cool stuff. But first we got to get a handle on the basics before you can get creative with everything else.
All right. Well, let's help you think about those. Maybe we'll call them November plans. What do you know about this tree behind me here? Anyone know what that is?
Sequoia?
It is a sequoia. It is my favorite plant on the entire planet. I trip over those. What do you know about a sequoia tree?
Very large. They're evergreens. They have very small cones.
They are actually small cones.
They have bark that has some fire resistant qualities to it and could be, up to like a foot, 2 feet thick. Needs fire to regenerate like their cones to spread, open up for their seeds.
How do you know all this?
I worked in outdoor education for 3 years.
Okay. I was hoping it's supposed to be common knowledge because
This tree
Wait,
behind
not
me,
everyone knows that? Wait, you guys didn't go on hikes in the redwoods all the time? No?
no, I can't even keep my cactuses alive. So no.
I used to have kids try to measure trees by seeing how many kids it would take to give a tree a hug. How many do we have to hug the tree because we were all tree huggers.
so the Gigantus sequoiamus, I think is something like that Latin word. It has a cousin on the coast. These trees only grow in California. Anyone know what the sequoia's cousin is on the coast?
Eucalyptus? Well, wait, that's way too small.
That actually is native to Australia. The cousins of these trees grow from Santa Cruz north all the way to the Oregon border.
Is it redwood?
It is a redwood. They are genetically cousins. And both of them have a tannic acid in them that prevent them from being burned. It also prevents insects from getting inside of there and causing all kind of mayhem. I learned this summer that you cannot really kill a redwood tree. If a redwood tree is cut or falls over, it produces sprouts. And so you can see like some of the ancient forests that's been cut, they'll have this 20-foot in diameter trunk and 6 or 8 trees are growing right out of that trunk. You can't kill a redwood. You can kill a sequoia. Anyone other than Laura know how long a sequoia lives?
A long time.
That's definitive.
More than 150 years?
A lot longer than 150 years.
Don't they live up to like 600 or like forever?
This tree behind me was starting to grow before Jesus Christ walked on the planet.
Oh my goodness.
So they're 2,000 to 3,000 years old. And they top out at about, 200. The redwoods are 300 feet. These will be about 200 feet. Any idea why they can't grow any taller?
Can't get water up there.
That's exactly right. Think about how much water weighs, and you got to get it through the root system and up through the tree and into those little tiny, it's kind of a pine needle. It's actually related to the cedar tree. They're not pine needles like you think of. They look like a waxy leaf. But water is the reason why they can only top out at a certain distance. And when you find a giant sequoia, you'll find that it is near a water source. So it has to have a creek or an underground stream or a pool of water that's living there. And in order for them to germinate, they have to have clear ground with no competition from other trees. So they have to have fire that cleans the forest out. Then it causes those cones to open up and they disperse. And I think a mature sequoia produces like 1 million seeds, 100,000 seeds a year that spread all over the place. But obviously only 1 out of every 100 years does it produce another giant sequoia just like it. They're able to survive drought and fire and pest and all kinds of crazy things. Now, why am I asking you all these dumb questions about my favorite tree? Because I want to talk about this: preconceptions, deeper learning, and metacognition. How do people learn and how do teachers help kids learn? The first thing we're going to start talking about is preconceptions. And students come to class with preconceptions about how everything works. And if their initial understanding is not engaged, they may fail to grasp that new concept and information that they're taught, or they may learn information for the purpose of the test, but revert to their preconceptions outside of the classroom. That's one of the reasons why we talked about engagement. Are your students really engaged in the content, or are they engaged in the process? What are some preconceptions that students might have about topics that you're currently teaching? And what does it mean to have a preconception? Did we all have a preconception about trees and how they grow?
Yes.
And how they get water, and maybe we even know a little bit about, oh gosh, the word just left me. Converting water and sunlight,
Photosynthesis.
thank you, photosynthesis. I couldn't think of it.
He was getting there. He was getting there.
Oh man, I tell you what, I need to look at my notes. Okay. What if we ask the kids, how does the moon rise and fall? Would they have different ideas about how that works? Absolutely. And so we need to know what those preconceptions are, because in many cases they're misconceptions, or there's no knowledge really there at all. In a formal setting, we would call that we give the kids a test before we begin start teaching. We call that what?
Pre-assessment?
Pre-assessment. Now, do they always have to be formal pre-assessment, choice, fill in the blank? How do we do pre-assessments? What are some ways you do pre-assessments?
One of you guys said KWL charts. I think it was Senora.
Gabriella.
Yeah, I only see the last name. So anyway, you talked about KWL. You talked about, I think somebody else mentioned like a pre-write, like a quick little response. And then you talked about the Padlets.
Padlets.
That's a way to do it too.
Like a physical movement where, normally in the classroom I do like a 4 corners, but I've adjusted it to be, if one of 3 things on a spectrum, so closest to the computer is this, farthest away is this, and somewhere in the middle is a different answer. And so that kind of, because one of the big things with outdoor education is like you only have them for a short amount of time. And so the best way to use that time is to get them to think about what they've experienced and then connect it, then investigate what's around them and then build a connection between the two. And so I'll usually have my kids like tell me something that they have already done in the past or what they feel or believe. And so I'll have them like, if you like this thing, stand really close to the computer. If you dislike it, stand back. And we just do and that also gets us moving.
That's awesome.
Well, there's tons of ways to do pre-assessments, and I don't really want to dive into it other than to say identifying what the kids kind of their concept of what's reality is critical for us Because if there is a misconception, then we're going to have to move the needle on that. And if there's a missing piece of information, then obviously we're going to have to teach that. So identifying the students' preconceptions and misconceptions is critical in helping students learn. Students kind of have to have a deep foundation of factual frameworks. They're going to have to understand facts and ideas and the concept of these conceptual frameworks, and organize knowledge on ways that facilitate retrieval and application. And I think, Lauren, you were talking about, hey, I'm going to take what they know and attach it and kind of transfer it into what they don't know, so that there's an attachment there in their brain.
They make
Critical.
bridge.
Say again, Ginny?
She was talking about how they look around them and make connections with what they know and what they want to know, and then they bridge those two, or what they want to know and the information around them, and how to bridge those and make connections.
How many of you remember high school geometry?
Oh, I hated it.
There you go. And you had to do a graph that showed some kind of an arc, or right, a parabolic arc. And why was that important? Have you ever used it since?
Nope.
Have you played any sports?
Oh, I was a basketball coach.
There's a parabolic arc. What
I
else
know.
about, right? One of the things that we see in baseball, y'all were talking about that before we started. StatCast can tell you the speed of a baseball as it's hit out of the stadium, and they can quantify it by saying that's a hard hit ball, but they can measure the degree and say if a ball's hit on a 22-degree plane at 100 miles an hour, that's got a 90% chance of being a home run. All of these things are part of geometry. And if we begin to introduce conversations about what kids do know and attach it to what they don't know, then we can start seeing them actually learning something that allows for retrieval later. And that's also very, very important. But we also need to know the underground or the background factual knowledge of how do we determine the arc of a ball by looking at the math. And so we have to teach them the math and the formulas that work with that and how it all fits. But really identifying those preconceptions, and then we can go on to the next thing. Identifying those misconceptions is step one. New learning that corrects misconceptions or builds on correct perceptions. And then, oh God, what is it with this?
It's the bold. It's the bold.
Feedback is the key. Check this out, guys. So we have our perceptions and our misconceptions, but the key to the learning is the feedback. Hold on, someone's going to knock on my door in just a second. You can see him walking up the ramp. Hold on, I got to tell him I'm on a Zoom. I'm on a Zoom.
Okay. I'm going to text you or talk to you later.
That'll work.
All right.
All right, sorry guys. All right, feedback that is specific and builds towards capacity. Proper, specific, and targeted feedback based upon formative feedback assessment enables the learner to think about their own process and compare that to the desired result, resulting in new learning. All right, now here's the fine art of teaching. Does feedback mean that we give students the answer?
No.
No.
So how do we work that? How do we give students feedback so that they arrive at the right conclusion without enabling them by just spoon feeding them the answer?
I think it's good to like direct them, like one, to restate what they are giving you, whether it's like a verbal answer, or whether you're looking at their writing or like a math problem, and say like, I see that you said or did this, this, and this. And so at least like we're on the same page. And then saying like, let's focus on this part, and like honing in on one specific part of their problem or their answer. And then saying like, okay, let's look at this again and go back to, I don't know, maybe like a practice problem we did together in math. Can you see like anything that's the same or different about those two? And like maybe compare it to previous guided lessons.
Or
and then
no.
try to find their own mistakes.
Well, and what you're saying is Socratic questioning. So instead of getting them the answer or giving them the answer, you're questioning them so that they, again, what you had said earlier, gather information that they've had previous, whether it's previous problem, previous lessons, whatever, and they're taking all that information and synthesizing it without you giving an answer, right? And then that's where, with Socratic, that's where you get, the kids are going to learn a lot more if they're walking through that Socratic process with each other than they are from us giving them an answer. So if I'm working on a problem, I'm more apt to listen to a friend anyway, and there's a lot less intimidation and everything else. So like as a teacher, I could say, hey, you know, Juan, can you explain where maybe we lost track on this problem? Or what doesn't look familiar? That kind of thing. What you were saying about asking questions and guiding them in that regard versus just walking them through, let's say, the steps.
I was thinking about math and thinking about how there's 4 or 5 different ways to arrive at the same answer. And that's part of what we're trying to teach in Common Core. Getting students to share their thinking is the next step, called metacognition. We'll talk about that in depth a little bit more in a moment. But going back to giving feedback, it's a way of leading somebody there with, and I almost want to think it's manipulating them there. We don't tell the kids that, but for instance, if we talk about my tree behind me, are there boy sequoias or girl sequoias, or how does that work? Does anyone know except for Lauren? Maybe Lauren doesn't know. Lauren, are there boy sequoias or girl sequoias, or how does that work?
I don't know. They're both.
Aren't they asexual? I mean,
Yeah,
or
I mean, they like, well, I also know that they don't just produce by cones, and the majority of them will, or at least redwoods will produce out of their roots, but I don't know about cones.
That's true for redwoods. They have a tendency to just kind of keep on going or spread through buds. But a sequoia tree is both, if you will, or asexual. And in one level of their trees is male cones, and on the other part of their cone is female, and they release the right stuff, and it mixes so they can kind of reproduce their own self, or they can reproduce their neighbors. But almond trees aren't like that. Did you know that there are boy almonds and girl almond trees? They
Pretty
have to have a
cool.
right mixture to make sure that they're all pollinated. Farrah was going to say something, I think.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's pretty cool. I didn't know that about almond trees.
If you can't just have one almond tree in your backyard and hope to produce almonds, you got to have one of each to make it work.
The same with plums, I think.
Pardon me?
I think it's the same with plums. We have a plum
I-
tree that's not reproducing because we only have one because the other one died.
So,
it's a widow.
as we're having this discussion, what are we doing here? We're giving you feedback. We're identifying misconceptions and helping steer the conversation in such a way that you're learning. And hopefully, if I've done my job right as a teacher, I've got you interested in giant sequoias. And I will tell you that, like Lauren said, how many kids does it take to hug a sequoia? It's 40-foot diameter. Oops, that's improper. It's 40 feet in diameter. It's crazy with a 2-foot bark. They are the biggest organism on the planet. Think about that for a moment. And they live in our backyard. We can jam up to Yosemite or Kings Canyon National Park, or even up into, well, we could if there was no fire, up above North Fork, and we can find some of these giant sequoia groves. It's incredible. So we're grabbing your interest, so we're getting engagement. We're identifying your preconceptions. We're giving you feedback, and we're modifying some of those misconceptions and building new learning. And
I
then
have a question
Yes.
though about, and I'm open for anybody to share their opinions or experiences. How effective is written feedback on like a Google Classroom assignments that's turned in? Because I mean, I'm with 4th grade and I really value detailed feedback and not giving an answer, but directing them to, you know, look at what they've done and like what they need to continue working on. Because I think that doing an assignment isn't really worth anything unless you have feedback on it. on what you did well or what you need to work on. But I don't know how effective my written feedback is, and I don't know if they're able to read that and really apply it, if it matters, if I need to be, like, if I really want them to have like a takeaway, if I need to meet with them in small groups and like talk about that feedback, or I don't know, I'm not quite sure how effective that is, if I should continue doing it or if I need to like add something on.
Well, think about being a 3rd or 4th grade student and you write an essay and your teacher gives you a grade and all kinds of feedback, and you're in the 4th grade. What do you do with it?
Look at it and be like, oh, there's my grade. Move on.
That's what they're going to do with it. So if you're hoping that they're actually going to engage in your feedback, you have to have some sort of accountability with it. They're rewriting their essay, they're retaking a test. It becomes the prompt for a group discussion the next time you're meeting in a classroom. And I will tell you that this is true for all human behavior. So for instance, if I was the site administrator at your site, and I said, I want everybody to write lesson plans and turn them in by 5 o'clock on Friday, but I never read them, or if I read them, but I never told you that I read them, how many of you would continue to write those lesson plans? Unless there's accountability with it, y'all are going to say, he didn't care, right? The same with going the other direction. Unless you're asking your students to do something with that feedback, they're not going to engage in it. But it can be a sort of assessment for you, whether it's formative or summative, in that now it becomes the topic for tomorrow, or maybe you have breakouts tomorrow and you're going to discuss some of their findings, because you're going to find commonalities in 2 or 3 different things that are going to stick out as you read through all of them. If you're trying to help kids with their writing, then there has to be a re-edit. Rewriting, a final, this is your rough draft. Okay, now incorporate what I said and give me a final draft. What do your other teachers think of Lauren's question? How good and valuable is feedback on writing assignments?
Linus, I would assume that yours is different again. I mean, do autistic children respond very well to that kind of feedback?
To a written feedback, I mean, I would not write, but I praise, I tell them, that was a good job, nice try, or stuff like that. I like how you're working, and it just depends. They do respond to it, because some of them get happy, or they'll go, yay, so they would respond to it. But like Steve was saying, I mean, being a kid, like the written things is kind of like, but maybe if she went about it as Lauren could, like, maybe try to talk to them, maybe do like a one-on-one and like explain it maybe that way. Cause I think verbally kids respond more.
Like a writer's workshop?
Yeah. Or even like getting maybe some of them together and kind of doing like a think, pair, share kind of a thing, and talk about like their, and like encouraging it like in that way.
Let me ask another thought. Have y'all played any athletic sports where you were being coached up, not just on the playground, but you were involved in a team sport? Lauren, what did you play?
Long time ago, I played volleyball.
Volleyball?
Like 3 years, yeah.
Gabrielle, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, tennis.
Tennis? Okay.
Vanessa was volleyball.
I played volleyball.
All right. When you were being coached up, did the coach give you 7 things that you had to correct at once, or did he break it down and tell you, all right, first we need to do what?
Work on your form.
Right. So in all 3 of your sports, hey, let's talk about your athletic stance and make sure that we have our knees bent and our feet or shoulder. Okay, let's practice that. Then there was the next one, and then there was the next one. But we have a tendency in education to say, okay, here are the 6 things that you need to fix. And that can be overwhelming for anybody in any position. Imagine if your administrator came to you after an observation and said, all right, but there's 6 things about your teaching practice that you need to work on this year, or I'm not going to give you a good evaluation. You're not coming back next year. How would that make you feel?
Probably just won't come back next year.
You'd probably just start crying and hide in the corner and then, where's the wine bottle? I'm done.
I mean, I already want to do all those things, so I guess it would make it worse.
All right. So feedback needs to be step by step, and it needs to be in pieces, bit by bit, and it needs to be very specific. So if I'm an English teacher and I ask them to give me an essay, when I return it, I'm only going to be focusing on my target goal of my academic outcome. I want kids to just be able to write a thesis statement. Yes, they're going to practice writing the whole paragraph, and I'm going to be looking at punctuation and some other things that I'll address later. But right now, I just want to know, can they write a thesis statement? Does that help, Lauren?
Yeah, and I also think that makes it almost easier on my end to not feel like, because also 4th grade for, my school, that's the first time they're actually receiving a grade. And so I think sometimes when they see it, they don't know what to do with it. And I feel the need to help them understand what they got right and what they didn't, and what was missing. And in reality, that might not actually be helpful unless we are, redoing the assignment, or unless we're working with a small group, or unless we're really only focusing on one specific skill. And I think that actually that specificity makes it easier on my side to spend more time on what matters and what's useful, rather than trying to do it all.
And this is off topic for a moment, but should the formative assessments be used as grades or only the summative assessment?
I don't know. I mean, I think this is different for everybody, but for me, I think that some of the formative assessments need to be graded to show that they're engaging to an extent on obviously a very low number of points, 5 versus a summative is 20, or 30. And then the formative are more are we engaging? Are we doing it? Are we putting in this effort? Are we seeing progress over time and engagement over time? But I think that there's tons of things that we can do and interact with as a class or in small groups or even one-on-one during the day that doesn't need to go into a grade book.
I think there are far more many activities that we're doing that help us as teachers read and understand the learning that's going on, but doesn't have to be graded, just like what you said. If I'm using 4 corners, or if I'm using a poll, or if I'm using Quizlets or whatever to kind of gauge where they're at. Even if we do use formative assessment as part of the grades, it needs to be lightly weighted as compared to the summative assessment. Because what we're really asking kids to do is, can you master this standard? And giving kids a grade for the effort leading up to mastering the standard almost isn't fair, if that makes sense. It seems like the grade really comes into play when I've mastered the standard and I can demonstrate that I've learned it. And that's but we're in a situation in our society and our culture where I did something, I want a grade for it. And it seems to be a little bit of a motivation for students to keep trying. The biggest thing that we can get students to believe in, though, is I just need to be persistent in trying my best at every day, and eventually we'll get there. And when you get kids that are really committed to being persistent and to try, and you're rewarding that, whether it's Lanessa with the verbal, hey, I like the way Tommy is trying today, or there's just a culture in your classroom of, we may not get the right answer, but we're going to try as hard as we can. When you're reinforcing that all the time, it really will spur deeper learning, because kids will perform far greater when they buy into that. All right, let's talk about metacognition. Do you remember that from your credentialing classes, that big old fancy 50-cent word, metacognition? It literally means to think about thinking. Metacognition, thinking about thinking. And when we understand how students arrive at the conclusion, we begin to understand how students have arrived at the conclusion or the answer to the problem. The key part is that they're sharing their thinking with others. So I liked what your strategy of, or what I talked about with the math, is that kids are teaching each other their strategy for arriving at a problem. It may be, here's the best way I can illustrate that. When I was learning how to drive, my dad said, all right, let's go to the store, and he let me drive. And of course I thought that's a big deal. I get to drive my dad's car, and he's in the passenger seat, and he says, all right, go. And he didn't say anything else. And I get there and I park the car and I want feedback, right? What, kid's gonna say to you, how did I do? And my dad said, well, it's not the way I would have done it, but you got us here. And at first I was kind of like upset by that. What do you mean it wasn't the way you would have done it? There's a better way to do it. And later on, as I kind of rethought that through, I realized my dad was saying, well, there was more than one way to get to the store and you chose a different way, but we're here at the store and we're safe. And that was the goal. That's the idea of sharing thinking with others, in that we get trapped into thinking that there's only one way to do it. And if you don't do it my way, it must be the wrong way. Have you ever had a roommate or you're married and they do something different than the way you do it, and in your mind, they're doing it the wrong way?
Yep.
They are doing it.
Right?
They are doing They are doing it.
I decided not to say anything about it, but my wife likes to have lights on in the house at night so the kids can find their way to the bathroom or whatever. And one of the things she likes to do is leave the light on over the oven, the hood light on. And I'm like, I didn't grow up that way. I grew up, every light gets turned off. We're trying to save electricity. Is her way right? Is my way right? In the end, is it really worth me mentioning? No. But we don't really have a capacity to think other people think differently than us, then it must be okay. We think other people think differently from us, it's wrong, right? What about kids? Do they think different than you do?
Yes.
Heck yeah. So we were talking about Paw Patrol. I don't think I've ever seen that. Do I need to see it? I don't need to see it. Okay.
The other thing about this metacognition is the justification for their answers. So instead of just how they came up with it, but tell me how you came up with that. And then in Avid, there's a big thing about, let's say we have a tutorial group, and Gabrielle brings a problem and she puts it on the board and she says, this is how far I got to this point, but now I am basically confused, or this is where I lost my momentum on this, or they call it a point of confusion. So if you can get a child to say, this is where I got to, but this is where I'm stuck, and somebody else says, well, have you tried this? Or what about this? That's all metacognition, but it's also when you ask a student to explain how they came to a conclusion or where they came up with that, having them put that into words is a whole nother level also of metacognition.
I like to do a practice that I learned about in my credential program, which is like which one doesn't belong. And there's a whole list of, a whole ton of different options where you get 4 pictures, and it could be 4 different numbers or 4 different colors or 4 different street signs or whatever. It could be anything, but a lot of times this leads into math conversations. So you can have like 4 equations or 4 shapes, and you have the kids sit quietly and they decide which one of those 4 doesn't fit in with the rest and why. And the thing is that there is some way that 3 fit together, and you can have all 4 of the boxes be left out for some reason. And it's a really great intro into like a math discussion about how to get them comfortable talking about their thinking, because there's no risk of being wrong. And then it doesn't really have any grounds to will they understand the lesson, right? Because it's not really about the lesson. It's just about learning how to explain your thinking. And I started doing that with my kids, and they just wanted to do it more and more and more. And then I realized after that I had more input during the lesson because they were already in the process of talking and sharing and being like, no, but this way. And I think I feel like a lot of the time I want to do all these big grand things with lessons, but in reality, just like you said with the procedures, like I have to train them how to do it before we even use it with content. And I think that which one doesn't belong is a great practice.
Idea.
Nice. All right, let's talk about this last one here on this page, identifying strengths in students and leveraging it for the rest of the class. All of your students have different strengths and areas of where they're really strong. How do we leverage that? How do we make them a hero? Instead of making them feel like they're terrible because they didn't get the right answer, how do we leverage what they're good at? Let me give you one example. And I may have shared this already, but my son, he's high performing or autistic. They used to call it Asperger's. And he was in biology class, and Joshua, for whatever reason, is an incredible auditory learner. And the rest of us, we hear something and we forget it a few minutes later. Not Joshua. If he was in class and he was listening, he could remember, and he could remember the details of everything that you said. And sometimes it was scary because it felt like you had a recorder in the house and it was constantly being on. But ask Joshua to write something, couldn't do it. To this day, he still can't sign his name. He has to print his name for a signature. Although I'm finding that's more common now with our kids. They don't teach cursive writing anymore. But he couldn't get thoughts from his head into his hands. And my Joshua biology teacher kind of figured that out. And then he found a student that could write for days, but had a hard time comprehending the material, especially during direct instruction. So he devised an accommodation where Joshua would tutor the student and she would write everything down on all the worksheets and all of the whatever project they were working on, they worked on together. She did all the writing. They had to take separate assessments, but each was leveraging the strength of the other. And Joshua on his own was able to get a B in a college prep biology class, which normally he would have struggled with because of all of the writing. They leveraged Joshua's strength of auditory learning and his partner's ability to write, and together almost made the perfect student, if you will. And then each of them did well in the classroom. What strengths do you see do they vary from student to student, or do they all come with the same palette of colors?
I think strengths vary from everybody, and one strength, like you mentioned, is could be another person's weakness. And so, like, I like to kind of do with my students is I have a student who's really good with puzzles, and when I want another kid to engage, I kind of have them like next to each other, trying to help them do it together. I mean, one might do a little bit more than the other, but just seeing the puzzle being made by someone, just triggers something with the other student, and they're able to manipulate the pieces. So I kind of use one strength, like you said, to help another's weakness.
Good. I was thinking of one strength. One kid might be able to ask really good why questions. And they're in a small group, and they're always asking why, right? Especially third graders. They're very good at asking why questions all the time. And as a mom and dad, you finally just say, because. Why? Because I said so. What's another example of a strength that students bring to class that you could leverage?
I have a student who just draws everything. So often, whenever we're doing new vocabulary, I'll have them do like the multi-step vocabulary, where not only do they find it in the text, they find the definition, but they draw a picture of it. And so I did a partner exercise where I assigned 2 kids to a document that had 2 different vocab words, and you had those 4 different boxes of finding in the text, draw a picture. And I like assigned the kid who was really good at drawing to the pictures, as well as like finding in the text to kind of, and then the one, because he has a hard time putting things into his own words, but he can draw it no problem. And then identifying where it is something that he needs extra work on, versus like the kid who can find it in the text easily needs a little extra work on putting it into his own words and, you know, doesn't really want to draw. So I would, you know, trying to find a balance between challenging them, but also like allowing them to do the things that they feel good about.
That's
Have you
exactly what I'm talking about.
well, like lit circles, literature circles, where you guys are all elementary, so I don't know if they do those, but where if you're reading a book, you know, like James and the Giant Peach or whatever, and then one kid illustrates, one kid does vocab, one kid does a summary. And so you basically, if you're strategic about it, right, you can put them in positions that they're strong in, and then therefore utilize their strengths to make the group stronger.
Good.
Yeah, lit circles is something that the 4th grade is like pretty known for at our school, and we just like have not been able to make that happen yet. But the goal is to eventually get them doing literature circles where they all are doing the same job, but just to get practice with it, so they all answer the same questions and they discuss it, and then eventually to give them differentiated jobs, and then again they come to the table with their differentiated answers or ideas or, you know, specific parts of the text that they're going to talk about.
Well, that's awesome.
Good. Well, you guys are getting it. Let's, you understand how we're talking about leveraging student strengths and helping them explain to one another, well, how did you come up with that? Why are you thinking that way? How did you get that answer? All these are great ways of getting kids to think about their own thinking and sharing that with their peers. We talked about a little bit at the beginning, how do you measure engagement and how you foster that. Problem solving and investigations help student engagement, so they're constantly solving a problem, and you're kind of guiding them through that. Helps to engage them without giving them the answers. So that's one of the things that we can work on. Students need to see a reason for learning. Actually, I think you guys do too, right? For instance, when my wife was pregnant, was the first time I picked up the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, right? I had no inclination of reading that as a 19-year-old kid without a wife, but all of a sudden I really wanted to learn what to expect when you're expecting, and I was reading about what do you expect when they're in in the infant stage, and what to expect when they're in the toddler stage. I read all those books. We want to know, why do we need to learn this? And if you think back to, we talked about geometry a minute ago, and y'all said, I don't remember anything about geometry. We don't learn it until we feel like there's a need to learn it. How do we lead students into knowing that this is important to learn and not just for the test? How do we connect that to real life? Y'all just muted on me. All right. Maybe we're getting tired. How do we spark curiosity in students? And how do we do the same for us as teacher? And we kind of put kids in together that have commonalities and strong connection between the long-term life goals and academic success are 2 of the ways to do that. How do we spark curiosity? And the third, I can't say this enough, is caring adults. When kids know that you care about them, they're going to be more engaged because they want to please you. There is so much data available about this across the nation, across the world, about caring adults. And so when your kids really know that you have boundaries, but you love them, they'll go walking through a wall for you. It's amazing how that works. All right. I'm sensing a vibe here. You guys are getting restless. I think I've hit my peak of engagement here with you and talking with you. Would you do me a favor though? There's a little quiz here that we would like for you to take before we meet next time. Can you do that for us? Take this quiz. It's on the second to last slide in our presentation. We'll talk about those results the next time we get here. We're also going to put, Jenny, would you post this in the classroom so that anybody that's coming to our next seminar can take the quiz?
Yep.
All right. Summary. Darn it. What is it with this? Oops. See, we're almost done. I promise. Let's do it that way. Identify preconceptions. Give students a reason for learning where we spark their curiosity or it's problem solving or connections to the interest and prior knowledge. Engage students with new learning. I lean heavily on that formative assessment we talked about. We even wondered about grading it. Give specific targeted feedback. We had a lot of examples of that. And give students, guide students to the answer instead of giving them the answer. And we talked about that. Review metacognition, allow students to share their thinking and ask, how did you get there? So students learn from each other. And last, I just continue to challenge you to be the caring adult in your students' lives. All right, if you have your slides open, you can click on the link. If you don't, you can use your phone to take a moment to just evaluate how we did today. We're going to let you guys get out of here and thank you for joining. You guys have been awesome.
Thank you.
All right, turn your headlights on to go home, all that smoke out there.
Yeah. And have a good week.
I clicked on, just so you know, I clicked on the evaluation and it says we didn't have access to the form. Is that just because,
You want me to-
or do we need to go somewhere else?
Hold on a
for it?
minute.
Okay, I got to run. I got refugees to take home.
All right, we'll see you later.
Staying with me from the fire. So, all right. Bye, you guys.
Bye. Apparently there was a box that I was supposed to check that I didn't check.
It opened. We're good. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
All these newfangled things. So, all right, well, I'm going to let you guys go. Have a great evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Bye. Thank
So
you.
much.
Bye.
Bye.